All right, good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the City of Kettering Planning Commission for Monday, December 2nd, 2024. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Miami Valley Cable Council for televising and taping tonight's meeting for rebroadcast on Channel 6 and streaming live over the internet at mvcc.net. It will be recorded and available for later viewing on mvcc.net. Since this meeting is both audio and videotaped to form a complete record for possible appeal to City Council and/or the courts, it is important that anyone who wishes to address the Commission will need to come to the lectern to speak into the microphone and give their name and address for the record. The Planning Commission is a volunteer, independent body appointed by Council whose mission is to hear all bodies involved and subsequently make a motion to approve, deny, continue, or recommend the application. All action by the Commission can be appealed to the City Council. This time I'd like to introduce members of the Planning Commission. On my far left is Ken Lackey, the Assistant Secretary. On my immediate left is Carol Fisher, our Secretary. Connie Gaw, our Recording Secretary, normally sits on my left, has an excused absence. I'm Don Rethman, the Chair. To my right is Troy Urbis, Vice Chair, and on his right is Ray Waskey, Commissioner. Member of staff present here this evening is Ryan Homsey, City Planner. First item on the agenda is old business, since an approval of minutes, and I will ask for these separately since we did not necessarily have full members of the Planning Commission for both. So the first one is the minutes of October 21, 2024. Do we have any comments on the minutes presented here this evening? No. Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. If there's no further discussion, call the roll, please.
Which was that the meeting where there was a member absent?
Second one.
It's the second one. Okay. Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Waskey,
Yes.
Mr. Urbis,
Yes.
Mr. Lackey,
Yes.
and then Mr. Rethman.
Yes. The next set of minutes we have is from the November 18th, 2024 minutes. Do we have any comments on the minutes as presented here this evening? If not, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from November 18th, 2024?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Carol, I think you were out.
I was. Never mind.
Second.
All right, if there's no further discussion, then call the roll, please.
Who got the second?
Troy.
Mr. Urbis? Okay, perfect. Mr. Waskey,
Yes.
Mr. Urbis,
Yes.
Mr. Lackey,
Yes.
and Mr. Rethman.
Yes, and you probably want to have Ms. Fisher abstain.
Abstain.
Oh, and Ms. Fisher.
Abstain.
All right. Next item on the agenda is new business. It is conditional use approval at 2185 Heritage Point Drive. It is a public hearing. It is PC-24-015. Mr. Homsey.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. This is a item that was reviewed by the Planning Commission in February of 2023. As a part of the our conditional use standards, if the project construction doesn't begin and conclude before 365 days from the approval, that approval expires. So after that approval in February of 2023, that approval expired in February of the next year. So the request is very similar as the one before that was before the board, and I believe, Troy, were you on the commission then?
It was February 24, I believe the meeting was, wasn't it?
It was 23.
23? I don't think so. No, it wasn't then.
Okay. But I believe everyone else was at that meeting. So the property in question is 2185 Heritage Point Drive, which is the property that formerly was occupied by Neil's Heritage House and the associated parking areas. On the screen now is a zoomed out version. The bottom left is a zoomed out version of the map with the property highlighted. The property is owned by Dayton History. Their main campus is kind of northwest of the subject site. Then on the right is a zoomed in version. You can see the building, which was formerly occupied by Neil's Heritage House. As a part of this request, the building would be reoccupied by Dayton History. And as a part of the application, the property owner submitted a description of the proposed use, which is similar as what we reviewed before. And I'll just read the email to put it in the record. And it was also included as a Exhibit 3, I believe, in the staff report that went out. So to quote, "In line with our initial desire to acquire the property, the Heritage House facility will serve as a vital role in support of Dayton History's nonprofit mission. Once we have completed the renovations and reach normal operations, I expect weekday traffic to work in the building to average no more than 10 vehicles, the result of roughly 5 full-time curators and archivists, and 3 to 5 volunteers on certain days of the week. While we have continually used the building as a staging area for museum programming, the end use will change to artifact care, document archiving, and historic photo digitizing. Stemming from our experience with the past years of Carillon Park programming while owning the Heritage House property, I can say that I don't expect the Heritage House parking lot usage to change much. While we would like it to remain an open lot free from parking obstructions for the daytime staging of our events every September. Even while suggesting to guests that this lot is available to them, years have gone by with no one using it. This is obviously not a desirable distance for our guests to decide to park there. So the last time this went before you, there was a proposal to include this as a overflow parking area about 35 to 40 days a year. The overall review still includes that as an option, but based on years of experience, it's unlikely that it'll get used that much in the future. So just to give everyone a feel for the site, this is a picture in the bottom left taken from Heritage Point, looking south toward the Neal's Heritage House building. This is that parking lot in question. This is a picture looking a little bit more southwest. You can't see South Patterson from here, but it sits in this general area. There's the parking lot. This is a view looking south from Maple Crest. At the bottom of the picture is the sidewalk that runs along Maple Crest. This is that existing wall that divides the subject property from the residential property kind of to the north of the site. And here's a view there is a sidewalk that connects the site to to South Patterson, and this is a view looking from the subject site, looking down that sidewalk towards South Patterson. The zoning of the subject property, the building itself is actually zoned B business, which is what permitted Neal's Heritage House to operate there in the past, and then the parking lot and the house at the northeast corner of the site, which is also owned by Dayton History, is zoned office. As a part of the application, the applicant submitted a site improvement plan with the caveat in my presentation that the site plan is not what's necessarily being reviewed tonight. There could be some conditions imposed on, if Planning Commission chooses to approve it, there can be some conditions imposed on the approval that will affect the site design a little bit, but this is not, the Planning Commission is not voting on this strict design of the site. The review tonight is for the use. So the plan includes lighting improvements throughout the parking lot, frontage, foundation, and interior parking lot landscaping, some asphalt removal to create the interior parking lot peninsulas and islands, and to create the buffer yard and frontage landscaping areas. And as a part of our review, this was included in the packet that went out with the staff report. There are a couple recommended conditions that do deal with the design of the site. One of them is that in the northern area of the site, roughly highlighted here, any light poles added to that area be no taller than 20 feet above grade. The plan also shows a few areas along Heritage Point where they are proposing to use boxwood shrubs, which are perfectly fine, but they're very slow growing. So staff recommended the Planning Commission impose a condition that those boxwoods be replaced with another evergreen that's just faster growing and a little bit bigger. In that northern and northwestern corner of the property, the plan does show the required privacy fence right here, but we're recommending, in order to provide better buffer into the neighborhood, that along Maple Crest, that they utilize a 3-foot privacy fence or wall along Maple Crest as well. And then there's a few areas of the site where the required curbing is not shown, but again, the site plan we have is conceptual, and we highlighted those locations in the packet that went out as a part of the staff report. Just like the last time this project was reviewed, we've met out at the property. We as in staff have met with the applicant and the owner of the property on a few different occasions. One of the biggest items of discussion as the redevelopment of the site is planned is ensuring that the stormwater system that's on the property today remains functional, or is made functional so it functions as intended. Now, this site developed well before our existing stormwater regulations were in place, but there is a functioning stormwater system on the property, mainly that directs the stormwater toward existing catch basins to the western side of the property that then connect to South Patterson. So this picture right here kind of shows how the lot is tilted away from the house to the northwest. This picture is taken from Maple Crest looking south. You can see that the parking lot sits a little bit higher, and it's tilted to ensure that the water kind of flows to the south. Here's a closer view of that. And this is a view looking west. This is Maple Crest here. This is some of the asphalt has been removed in this area, and the plan shows removing more about this kind of triangle of asphalt be removed as well along some landscaping areas. But we want to make sure that the parking lot is not tilted toward any adjoining properties. And this is a picture that shows where the main stormwater is directed through the parking lot. You can kind of see it as a part of the topography map. You can see there's a little bit of a swale in the parking lot here. And as you get to the edge of the parking lot at the end of that swale, there's an opening in the existing curb right here. And you can't see it very well, but this slightly lighter area here is a catch basin that is next to that pedestrian path. And that ties into a 12-inch storm sewer pipe that then ties in to the storm sewer pipes along Patterson. So there is a functioning stormwater system here. Just as they redevelop the site, this needs to remain functional as it was intended. And staff is recommending a condition to that effect. So as a part of the conditional use review, museums are allowable conditional uses in the office zoning district and are permitted by right in the B business zoning district, and this request represents a new conditional use. There's a few sections of the zoning code that are applicable to the request as they relate to conditional use approval. The first are the use-specific standards contained in section 1137.06.14 of the Kettering zoning code, and these are specific to museums, libraries, and similar uses. So the first standard is that all structures must be located at least 35 feet from any residential used property, and the only structure on the property is in excess of 35 feet from the nearest residentially used property. So that standard is met. Standard B, for sites that do not have ingress and egress from a thoroughfare, arterial, or collector street, a traffic management plan shall be submitted in accordance with section 1153.08.14 of the Kettering zoning code. And I'll just read what staff included in the report. While there is an alley that provides access to the site from West Schanz, which is a secondary arterial per Kettering's thoroughfare plan, the primary access points to the site will be from Heritage Point, which is not a thoroughfare, collector, or arterial. For this reason, staff is recommending a condition that a traffic management plan be submitted prior to the use of the parking lot as an overflow parking area. Staff understands that the initial use of the parking lot will be low in intensity, but if this were to change in the future, a traffic management plan must be submitted. And as a part of the review of this project in 2023, staff discussed the traffic and access to the site with members of the Kettering Engineering Department. In this location, since Heritage Point is wide and traffic would not logically pass through the adjoining residential neighborhood when entering and exiting the site, there at the time, there were no major concerns associated with vehicular traffic, especially if parking is limited to the employees and volunteers working in the building. Also, as a part of the improvement of the property, the current conditions with access points is non-conforming. They'll be closing 3 of those existing access points and reducing it to only 2, which is required by the zoning code. So this standard is conditionally met. Condition C, such uses shall be by a political subdivision or be recognized or a recognized 501c3 organization according to the IRS. The property is owned by Dayton History Heritage House LLC, which is a tax-exempt nonprofit organization, so this standard is met. Standard B is the general requirement that if this is considered a conditional use in the zoning code, that it must meet the general conditional use standards contained in section 1153.08 of the Kettering zoning code, which I'll get into next. So in section 1153.08.8 of the Kettering zoning code, these are the general standards that all conditional uses have to meet throughout the city. And I will go through those real quick. Number 1 is that the proposed conditional use shall comply with all applicable regulations of the Kettering zoning code. The current site improvement plans, which were included as Exhibit 1 in the staff report for the property, comply with most of the minimum standards of the Kettering zoning code. But there are a few conditions staff is recommending in order to ensure that the use of the property is buffered from adjoining residential uses and as a way to ensure that the stormwater system on the property functions as intended. Attachment D, as a part included in the staff report, includes those comments. And just to give a quick summary, the recommended changes included but are not necessarily limited to: number 1, rather than boxwoods, use evergreen shrubs that will quickly grow into the required, use a faster growing, larger evergreen shrub along Heritage Point. Number 2, use a privacy fence rather than a hedge for screening in the northwest corner of the property. And they've already actually swapped out the hedge over there with a privacy fence, but it doesn't quite go as far as it needs to go. Taper this privacy fence down to a 3-foot tall privacy fence that wraps along the Maple Crest frontage. Number 3, in the northern portion of the site, keep the mounting height of light fixtures no higher than 20 feet above grade and install shields where needed to obscure the light sources from adjoining residential properties. Number 4, a shield may be needed on the northernmost light fixture to prevent excess light trespass from spilling into Maple Crest Drive. Number 5, ensure the southernmost access drive aligns with the alley across the street, and I believe that comment is already met. Excuse me. Number 6, extend the curbs to all areas where such curbing is required along the northern and western sides of the property. Number 7, with the exception of, Number 8, control the stormwater on the north side of the property to prevent the erosion of soil and damage to the house at the northeastern corner of the site. So this standard is conditionally satisfied. Letter B, the proposed conditional use shall conform to the character of the neighborhood within the same zoning district in which it is located and shall have no more adverse effects on the health, safety, or comfort of persons living or working in the neighborhood, or shall be no more injurious to property or improvements in the neighborhood than would any other use permitted by right within the same zoning district. I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. The building itself is zoned business B, so a restaurant would be permitted there. B is it is the most permissive commercial zoning district in the city, and the parking lot is zoned office. The proposed use is much lower in intensity than a lot of other uses that would be permitted by right in either the office or the B zoning district. So provided all the conditions staff is recommending are met by the final development of the property, staff feels this requirement is conditionally satisfied. Letter C, adequate utilities shall be provided. The existing utilities are adequate for the proposed use and no public improvements are necessary, nor are any proposed to allow this use to move forward, so this requirement is met. Letter D, adequate measures shall be taken to provide ingress and egress so designed as to prevent traffic hazards and to prevent traffic congestion on public roads. I also touched on this earlier, but the site is currently non-conforming with regards to access points on the Heritage Point. The site plan that has been submitted would make the site compliant by consolidating the 5 existing access points into 2, which would be spaced apart appropriately. According to the applicant, the parking lot will be used sparingly as an occasional staging area for events and as a parking lot for approximately 10 people, so the amount of traffic to and from the site is expected to be minimal, especially when compared to the traffic that could be generated if the property were utilized fully with other uses permitted under the same zoning designations, which would include professional and medical offices, restaurants, and general retail. Further, in order to comply with section 1137.06.14.b, staff is recommending a condition that the required traffic management plan be submitted for review and acceptance prior to the issuance of a zoning certificate for the use on the site if the parking lot is to be used as an overflow parking area for events at the main museum campus. So this requirement is conditionally satisfied. Letter E, the proposed use shall not be noxious or offensive by reason of vibration, noise, odor, dust, smoke, or gas. The proposed use will not generate noxious or offensive vibration, odor, dust, smoke, or gas. So this requirement is satisfied. Letter F, the proposed use shall not injure the use and enjoyment of the property in the immediate vicinity for purposes already permitted, nor substantially diminish or impair the property values within the neighborhood. Provided the recommended conditions are met by the final plans for the property, adequate buffering and controls on the site will be in place to prevent negative impacts on adjoining properties. The proposed lighting improvements to the site should result in improved security, while the aesthetic improvements will result in significant improvements to the appearance of the property. So this requirement is conditionally satisfied. Letter G, the proposed use shall not impede the orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property for uses permitted within the zoning district. The proposed use will have no such effect. The intensity of the proposed use is minor relative to the other uses that are permitted by right on the subject property if the owner were to utilize the property to the fullest extent allowed by the Kettering zoning code. So this requirement is satisfied. Letter H, the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the proposed use shall not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare. The proposed use will have no such detrimental effects provided that the recommended conditions are met, so this requirement is conditionally satisfied. And finally, letter I, the public interest and welfare supporting the proposed use shall be sufficient to outweigh the individual interests that are adversely affected by the establishment of the proposed use. The proposed use will have no such adverse effects that must be outweighed. The proposed use of the building is low in intensity compared to other uses that could operate by right on the property, meaning the traffic impacts will be minimal. Further, the improvements that must be made to the site in order to bring it into compliance with the Kettering zoning code will result in improved aesthetics and buffering for the site, which is supportive of the public interest and welfare. So this requirement is conditionally satisfied. Now, I know that was a lot, but and there are some people here who I believe will want to speak. But before that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, if there are any.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Hamzy?
I have none.
I don't have anything. Nope.
All right. At this time, if the applicant has anything that they wish to address to the commission, now is your opportunity, or otherwise we'll open it up to the public. We just ask that if you're going to speak, you need to come to the lectern, give your name and address for the record.
I think it's probably, might be more appropriate that we answer the questions.
Fair enough. All right. So at this time, if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to address the commission regarding this application, now is your opportunity.
Whoever's first.
Good evening. I'm Brian Hart. I live on 2035 Heritage Point Drive, so I'm not too far from the subject property. I certainly have no, I'm a member of Dayton History, and so I'm looking forward to having, or continue to have Dayton History as a, as a neighbor. My interest, or my curiosity, maybe to some extent an interest, extended. I guess I've got several questions. Maybe I could ask them piecemeal, or I can ask them all at once.
You just address all your questions to us, and then we will work on getting you an answer.
All right. I'm curious, what is the intended longer-term use of the Dayton History-owned house on the corner of Maple Crest and Heritage Point?
Okay?
My second question is, with the pavement plan, clearly this is a significant rearrangement of the existing pavement. Will the existing pavement just be restriped, or will it be ground down and will we totally, basically brand-new pavement or reuse of the existing? And will there be restrictions on the use of non-Dayton history associated equipment being parked? For instance, staging of construction, in the past Miller Pipeline, other uses of the property, or will it be pretty much restricted to the employees at the main property and the occasional overflow parking associated with the Dayton History Complex campus down the street?
Okay.
And I think that is the last of my questions.
All right. I mean, we can sort of collect all the questions at once and then bring the applicant up to do that. So if there's anybody else in the audience, appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. Come on down and give your name and address for the record.
My name is Tracy Gibson. I live at 2110 Heritage Point, which is directly across the street from this lot. I spoke on this last time too, and first, certainly we're grateful to Dayton History for what they do for the city, and we're excited by their intended use of this building. My concern is mainly with any overflow parking, with any large events that may occur. The plan shows a lot of parking places available in this parking lot. So if we're going to consistently in the future be used at, if it's going to consistently be used in the future as overflow parking, I have a lot of concerns for that. Will there be security provided when it's being used as this lot? That's a lot of people being introduced to. While our street is fairly wide, it is a very small neighborhood, basically 3 streets. And that's a lot of people to introduce into a small area at one time. Safety, certainly in this neighborhood, there are a lot of walkers, there are a lot of small children that live on this street. So if we have a lot of traffic being introduced at a specific time, that's certainly going to be a concern for us. The lighting is an ongoing concern for us living directly across the street from this lot. If there's going to be an increase in lighting, that's going to affect my property, my ability to relax in my home, if I'm having a lot of lights shining through the windows. Certainly we want the light for safety, so I realize that that's a necessary thing, but it's a lot being provided. This is also basically, although the street does empty into Shantz on one side and Willow Grove on the other, it's a small street. So if we're going to have a lot of people introduced at one time, will there be efforts to protect our parking? Most of the residents of the street need to park on the street. So if there's a lot of overflow parking and there's no room in the lot and people start parking on the street, that's going to be a concern for us, and also just a safety concern at any one time. Again, it's a small space. And of course, continued maintenance of the lot. It looks like it might be a lot to take care of. So if this is directly across from the street of my house, it's going to affect my property values if it's not being cared for properly. Those are my concerns.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay, seeing as no one else is coming forward, if we can have the applicant come up and we can run through the items for, I guess, any ones you have. So name and address.
Great. Yes, Brady Kress, 1000 Carolina Boulevard, Carolina Park, Dayton History.
Great. First question I had was the intended long-term use of the house in the northeast corner.
Yeah, the long-term use is, we actually had a tenant, we've had numerous tenants in that house over the years. The last one moved out last summer. The long-term intent is to renovate that house, improve it, and have tenants there. For the, I want to say, everyone that's lived there has been employed by us.
Okay.
So we've had program managers, education managers, and so forth, and we think that will continue. The one exception to that was the superintendent of the Dayton Aviation Heritage National Historical Park, who lived there temporarily. And we are in discussions with the National Park Service to see if there are, again, employees that would want to live at that house seasonally.
Okay, very good. All right, I guess there was a question about the existing pavement in terms of the, plan. Obviously, is it just going to be restriped? Is it going to be, I guess, what are the plans for the existing parking? Because it looks like it's a little bit rough shape, so.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, the parking lot's in very rough shape. I will say that the plan, per us following the guidelines given to us, actually contains less, it will contain less parking than exists now.
Right.
And, when it was a restaurant 24/7 for, 50 years. So it is in rough shape, mainly because we haven't wanted to improve it, knowing there's going to be construction traffic while we restore, renovate the building. So once that's finished and we do a final grade, that will be ours to maintain, if that's the question. As far as the number of spaces, we really don't. We want to preserve that as parking, but really have no intention of it's going to be very rare if most of that parking is ever used.
Right.
I've joked with Ryan numerous times it's going to be the best looking parking lot nobody uses
Right.
in the city.
Yeah.
But that's,
Humans don't want to walk if they can park close, so.
well, that's true. And I think that's an important piece for folks to realize. We've owned this property for close to 10 years now, and that parking has always been available to our guests during events. I have parked up there by myself numerous times just to not park at Carillon, because Carillon's parking is pretty limited, and no one follows me. And so that's, for the last decade, it's kind of been a quick study,
Right.
or a 10-year study in how frequent people want to park up there.
Mhm.
As it relates to parking, we have more success with people, us borrowing space from UD and the Marriott. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because it's up the hill or what, folks are a lot more willing to park over on UD's property than at Heritage House.
Okay. Next question was, I guess, are there any, future plans for the staging of non-Dayton history vehicles on the property?
No, and in fact, the only time that's happened, and it has happened numerous times, we've been asked by the city or by contractors who are working for the city, street repairs and so forth, if they could use that parking lot. We were not using it, and so I know, and it's unfortunate they've sometimes been there longer than we thought they'd be, but we don't intend to do that, and that includes the tree lot that was there for a couple years. As we said at the last meeting, we were stopping that practice as well, and that it's been 2 seasons now where we have not had anything extracurricular going on in that lot.
Okay.
Chairman, sorry, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I can add a little bit to that. Every time that that lot was used, whether as the tree lot, or I know that there was some Miller Pipeline used it to stage for some of their work out there, the people operating that use had to get a temporary use permit from us.
Okay.
So they didn't just show up. Normally, I think the Miller Pipeline project is done in that area, but I think the reason, it was just kind of coincidentally, overlapped with when, not long after Dayton History acquired the property, but if a pipeline project goes through a neighborhood, anytime there's a sizable piece of asphalt or even a vacant piece of land, people will get temporary use to use it as staging, and then the project is done, and then we don't get another application for 50 years.
Okay.
So ever since the tree lot stopped operating there, I haven't gotten a request to use that as a staging area, but they did always get a temporary use permit.
Okay. All right, next item here, and I don't know, if my notes might be a little, so it was regarding the overflow parking and/or the number of spaces. I think this, we've sort of been addressing this, so, and I think the way staff's report is like, we're leaving the door open, but if there's sort of, I guess, the intent, and maybe we'll just, I'll sort of speak, and you can either agree or not, was but that there would need to be a traffic management plan put in place
Yeah.
if it was like going to be used for overflow parking and it's more of a serious, regular way.
As a part, when this was reviewed last time, it was 35 to 40 days estimated that the parking lot would be used as either a staging area or overflow parking. I believe that was the, and this request is we're kind of acknowledging that it's probably not going to be used as overflow much at all, but if it is, they still need to turn in that traffic management plan. And if it ends up being used more than the 35 to 40 days that was reviewed both the last time and tonight, that it could be considered a modification of the conditional use. But, so yes, they would have to turn the traffic management plan in, and the main intent behind that requirement is that if people are parking up here, they might not be familiar with the neighborhood. So you kind of have to tell them, you enter here, you might have to put some signs out there to direct people into the parking lot and how to get out. Estimate the number of people that'll be up there. Like, we had to do a traffic management plan when Gentilly Park was built to make sure that we weren't dumping a bunch of cars onto that street. So it's pretty clearly laid out what they need to give us as a part of a traffic management plan, with the main goal in this case being, if people are going to enter the site, they need to not leave and go through the neighborhood. They need to leave either through the alley onto West Shantz or in that access point closest to West Shantz, and then just leave. They'll need to make sure that the people that are parking up there know where they need to go.
Okay. And I guess next item here was regarding security for overflow parking. So I guess if the need arises, and probably related to what Mr. Homsey was saying, obviously something other than just sort of, build it and they'll come. It is a little bit off the property, so in terms of either keeping an eye on it and or having signage so that people can, I guess, orderly find their way on and off, or...
Yeah, I think if we had ever planned to use it where we'd have 150 cars up there, we indeed would do that.
Okay.
The study and change the use, and I just, and when we initially put this application together, the question was kind of worded, what could you ever see? And so at that point, it was like, well, I mean, my gosh, if people were to use it during Carol on Christmas, for example, that's where that 35 of those days were Carol on Christmas that's going on right now. It's like, well, I guess that's a possibility, but we really haven't seen any evidence at all that people are willing to use it.
Right.
They'd rather pull up on the curb at Carillon and park between the trees, and we've seen some pretty wild parking jobs at Carillon Park, as opposed to going up that hill.
Right.
So I think there would be a pretty large shift in our operation and expected operation. It would come back to the city if we said, hey, I think we have something new happening here. We don't anticipate that at this point.
Okay. All right, so, and I think that's also then, the next one was then the safety of the traffic, which is all sort of tied in together. Sort of item, the fourth item here was, I guess, regarding lighting, and I don't know if there's building lighting or just, and obviously the city has very strict standards in terms of shielding lighting so that we don't get glare onto neighboring properties, so.
Right, and I think the building lighting, I think was addressed.
Okay.
We tried to
Mhm.
wash the sides of the building
Yep.
with light, just to kind of give it some life back there, again, for the safety and property security perspective. The lot itself is one that we're really trying to follow the guidelines that are laid out by
Yeah.
the city of Kettering.
Right.
I'm not, I would rather not spend the money on light poles and keep lights on all the time for a parking lot that I really don't think is going to be used. There's a way to switch those. If it's allowed to switch those off, we would do that.
Right.
But of course, we'll work with the city to
Mhm.
make that however you are requiring it
Sure.
to be done. Ryan, do you?
There, yeah, Brady mentioned the last meeting, there were some lights on the building that were
Hmm.
shining out. Those were directed down shortly
Okay.
after the meeting, and I believe they're still directed down. But we do have requirements in the zoning code about, once you get above a certain lumen count, the light fixtures need to be fully cut off. They shine straight down. Plus, there's a recommended condition about applying shields to some of those fixtures to help hide the light source. In terms of the ability to switch them off, I believe as a part of the alter conditional use, there was a condition about shutting some of the lights off along East David.
Right.
So the planning commission does have the ability to impose a condition like that on the approval. I would recommend doing that. We can add that depending on how the planning commission decides to vote. But we do have pretty strict standards to prevent lights from being disruptive to people that around the surrounding area.
Right. I think the other thing is, in terms of light, is obviously headlights, and part of the requirements for screening that is the hedges or whatever. So hopefully that avoids.
Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot. Yeah, one of the conditions recommended about using a faster growing evergreen shrub to help create that screen. And also about the parking on Heritage Point itself, the closing of 3 access points will add parking to the street. It won't add a ton, but it will add 4 or 5 spaces directly in front of this property that can be used, because today you get a ticket if you parked along this entire area here, because there's access points every 30 feet, it seems like. But yeah, we can add a condition about the lighting. And another one of the comments that came up was just the general maintenance. Assuming this proceeds and they build it to meet the code, that's when the property maintenance code comes into play. If there's maintenance issues, they get addressed through the property maintenance code. So.
Okay. And I guess the one last item, and you touched on it here a little bit, the fact that there will be actually additional on-street parking created once some of these access points are closed, but I don't know, is there anything within the zoning code that says the on-street parking can be reserved for the residents?
There's nothing in the zoning code about reserving it. 'Cause
Cones,
the zoning
lawn
code-
furniture for parades, there's creative ways that when people know things are happening, they figure out how to stake out their space. So I would say,
The zoning code does not regulate the public right of way.
right,
There are some engineering, my understanding is it's very difficult to get, it's very hard to reserve parking for a particular. You can restrict parking during certain hours, and even that's not easy to do. But I'm not aware of anywhere in Kettering on a public
Yeah.
street where there's parking reserved for people that live within a certain, because you can't really enforce that. Like,
right.
the police can't go by and be like, that person doesn't live up the street, ticket. Like it, but
Right.
there are ways to restrict the hours that the street is parked on, but I don't foresee people parking on the street that are going to Heritage, that are going to events at the museum campus. I can't
Yeah.
guarantee that'll never happen. I mean, but I can't think of what would drive someone to do that when there's so many other options that are more convenient than parking right there.
Right.
But I do understand the concern. If this was a use that was where that lot was gonna be full 3 times a week, and for events in that building, you would park on the street, but there aren't events in the building. It's just
Yeah.
It's just, I think the use that is being requested and we're reviewing tonight is minimal enough that I can't think of a reason a lot of people would park there
Okay.
for museum events.
All right. That was the list of questions that I had. Did any other commissioners
I have none.
write down any other questions that we didn't address?
No, the ones I-
And did we adequately address the questions that you all came forward? So,
Okay.
all right.
Thanks.
Mr. Kress, anything else you want to address here to the commission?
Thank you for listening. We've had this property for a long time. As a private nonprofit, it takes us quite a while to raise the money to do a project like this. And so
Understand.
We're ready to go whenever you'll let us proceed.
All right, thank you. All right. If no one else in the public wishes to come forward and address any questions to the commission, we will ask for staff recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman, and I will read the recommendation with the conditions. If the Planning Commission wants to add a condition about switching some of the lights off, we can do that. Just we'll have to find a way to word the language properly, but I don't think it's a bad idea to have a condition about.
Ken's really good at that.
I've written one, I don't know.
Oh, have you written?
Go ahead,
There you
do your
go.
thing. Go ahead and do your thing, and I'll throw it in, and then we'll work on it.
We'll massage the language so it makes sense. Okay. So, thank you, Chairman. The staff recommendation is that the Planning Commission motion to approve the conditional use permit, that's case number PC-24-015 with the following conditions. Number one, a privacy fence or wall be utilized in the northwest corner of the site along both Maple Crest and the adjoining residential property as shown in attachment D, of the staff report. Number two, any light poles installed in the northern section of the site as shown in attachment D be no taller than 20 feet above grade. Number three, if needed, shields be installed on the light fixtures on the site to help obscure the lights from adjoining residential uses. Number four, the boxwood shrubs along Heritage Point Drive intended for screening the vehicular use area be replaced with a larger and faster growing evergreen shrub. Number five, the existing direction of stormwater flow be maintained and the conditions on the site meet the applicable stormwater and erosion control requirements of Kettering's Property Maintenance Code. Number six, as required under section 1137.06.14.b of the Kettering zoning code, a traffic management plan be submitted for review and acceptance by the city of Kettering prior to the issuance of a zoning certificate for the use of the parking lot as an overflow parking area. And number seven, should the existing retaining wall in the northwest section of the site be removed, a plan for that area of the site be submitted that shows how stormwater will be prevented from running onto adjoining properties. And one clarification I wanted to add to comment number six, the zoning certificate is issued prior to the initiation of the use itself. The zoning permit is issued prior to the initiation of the construction. So the way that this is worded, if their plans are finalized and meet all of these design-related conditions, they can submit the traffic management plan and still have their zoning permit. Just before they can use it, they need the certificate. So I wanted to clarify that. But
All right.
that's the recommendation.
Any questions by the commission on the recommended
I have none.
staff recommendation? So, all right. If not, this is a public hearing, so unless somebody in the public wishes to address the commission, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All right. Call the roll.
Hold on a second. Sorry. Who? I'm sorry.
Ms.
No.
Fisher?
Ms. Fisher, are you first?
Yes.
Right, okay. I heard the second. I was trying to find my roll here. Okay. Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Waski,
Yes.
Mr. Lackey,
Yes.
Mr. Urbis,
Yes.
and Mr. Rethman.
Yes. All right, so Mr. Lackey, I believe you have a motion for us.
I do. I guess I would first ask the fellow commissioners if they wish to add that additional
Oh,
condition
good-
about
good
lighting.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, giving them the option to,
I'll read what I wrote before I start with it.
Yeah.
So we can wordsmith that if we need to. I wrote condition 8, any parking lot lighting installed as part of the site plan will have the ability to be turned off when the parking lot is not in use.
Sound good?
yeah?
Good job.
Is that all right? Okay, in that case, I have conditional use approval for 2185 Heritage Point, whereas an application has been received from John Roll, AIA of Roll and Associates, 3176 Kettering Boulevard, Dayton, Ohio, 45439, agent of the property owner at 2185 Heritage Point Drive, requesting approval of a conditional use to allow the use of the property at 2185 Heritage Point Drive, Kettering, Ohio, as a support function of the Carillon Historical Park Museum campus. And whereas the Planning Commission has reviewed the facts surrounding this request, including an oral and written report by city staff, which is incorporated herein, and held a hearing on December 2nd, 2004, and whereas this request constitutes approval of a conditional use to allow the use of the property at 2185 Heritage Point Drive as a support function for the Carillon Historical Park Museum campus, with the structure serving as location for artifact care, document archiving, and historical photo digitizing, and the parking lot serving as an occasional overflow parking area and staging area for museum events. And whereas the Planning Commission adopts the findings of fact presented by staff in their staff report, which is incorporated in this motion. I move that the applicant's request for approval of conditional use to allow for use of the property located at 2185 Heritage Point as a support function of the Carillon Historical Park Museum campus be granted with the following conditions. Condition 1, a privacy fence or wall be utilized in the northwest corner of the site along both Marycrest and the adjoining residential property as shown in attachment D of the staff report. Condition 2, any light poles installed in the northern section of the site as shown in attachment D be no taller than 20 feet above grade. Condition 3, if needed, shields be installed on light fixtures on the site to help obscure the light sources from adjoining residential uses. Condition 4, the boxwood shrubs along Heritage Point Drive intended for screening the parking lot be replaced with a larger and faster growing evergreen shrub. Condition 5, the existing direction of stormwater flow be maintained and the conditions on the site meet the applicable stormwater and erosion requirements of Kettering Property Maintenance Code. As required under Condition 6, is required under Section 1137.06.14.b of the Kettering Zoning Code, a traffic management plan be submitted for review and acceptance by City of Kettering staff prior to the issuance of a zoning certificate for the use of the parking lot as an overflow parking area. And Condition 7, should the existing retaining wall in the northwest section of the site be removed, a plan for that area of the site must be submitted that shows how storm water will be prevented from running onto adjoining properties. Condition 8, any parking lot lighting installed as part of the site plan will have the ability to be turned off when the parking lot is not in use. End of motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the proposed motion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Lackey,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Urbis,
Yes.
Mr. Woski,
Yes.
and Mr. Rethman.
Yes. Good luck with your project. All right. That's fine. Got everybody sort of filed. Jeez Louise.
It was just
Take
some paper
away
Sunday.
certificate.
Services are sometime as well. No. I'm not sure if there's any relation there or not, but it says Thank you. But yeah, it's parking lot is rough. I'm glad you wrote it last time. It's rough. So, yeah, it'll, if they go through it, they will.
See, I can see. 35 days of business. It wouldn't last 55.
All right, next item on the agenda here, item number 3 is to designate/appoint the Director of Planning and Development, Thomas Robillard, to City of Kettering Community Reinvestment Area Housing Council. Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Robillard asked me to cover this because it's pretty simple. I didn't think he made sense for him to stay for 3 extra hours. So this is a very straightforward request. In 2023, City Council established the city's first community reinvestment area, mainly over the Aragon and Oak Park. That's the Baton, we call it the Baton neighborhood, kind of the northeast corner of the city. And the enabling legislation at the state level that allows municipalities to establish CRAs requires that a housing council be established as a part of that. And the housing council's role, they meet probably about once a year, but the main intent of that group is to review any properties that get CRA designation to make sure that the plans that are submitted and follow the regulations at hand. So in the state legislation, 2 of those members are supposed to be appointed by a city council, and 2 are supposed to be appointed by the mayor, and 1 is supposed to be appointed by the planning commission. So the item on the agenda tonight is to appoint the planning and development director to be on that board. So that is the gist of the request this evening.
Any questions for Mr. Homsey?
Just one question. Is this a continuing, unending term of office or appointment?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. It's continuing and unending unless the motion is rescinded. And this is to appoint the planning and development director, whether it's Mr. Robillard or 5 years later someone else is here. It's to appoint that position to be on the board. So yes, it's continuing even if the person changes.
Okay.
It's just it's the position being appointed.
All right. Mr. Hurwitz, I believe you have a motion for us, right?
Yes, I have an appointment, motion to approve appointment to CRA Housing Council. Whereas on March 28, 2023, the Kettering City Council adopted resolution number 10887-23, which established the Aragon Oak Park Community Reinvestment Area. And whereas section 8 of resolution 10887-23 established a 5-member community reinvestment area housing council and provided that the Planning Commission would appoint 1 of the 5 members. Whereas the Planning Commission desires to appoint the Director of the Planning and Development Department of the City of Kettering. Therefore, I move to appoint Thomas R. Robillard, Director of the Planning and Development Department, to the City of Kettering Community Reinvestment Area Housing Council. End of motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second the motion.
All right, any discussion on the motion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Urbis,
Yes.
Mr. Waske,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Lackey,
Yes.
and Mr. Rethman.
Yes. All right, item 4 on the agenda this evening is audience participation for any items not on the agenda. Do we have anyone in the audience wishing to come forward and address the commission? Seeing as no one is coming forward, moving on to other business, signing of plats.
We have none this evening.
Okay, communications and reports.
The only one that I have is for the comprehensive plan update. Staff will probably be giving a update to that process at the second meeting in December. We have one item on that agenda. I don't know if people will be out of town, just let me know, but that process is moving along. We're finalizing the steering committee members now, and we're working on putting together a list of stakeholders for the consultant to reach out to have stakeholder meetings with like professional organizations, big property owners, developers, architects, I think people of that. So if you have any ideas, let me know, and we can add them to the list.
All right.
That's all.
Planning Commission comments. Any comments? Mr. Lackman,
I don't have
Ms.
any.
Fisher, Mr. Urbis?
No.
Mr. Woski?
I have none.
I have none as well. With that, we will adjourn this regularly scheduled meeting of the City of Kettering Planning Commission for December 2nd, 2024 at 8:04 p.m. until our next regularly scheduled meeting.